Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our SEAC meeting for February 18th, 2021. I would like to call the meeting to order by acknowledging, by reading the acknowledgement that the Durham District School Board acknowledges that many Indigenous nations have longstanding relationships, both historic and modern, with the territories upon which our school board and schools are located. Today, this area is home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We acknowledge that the Durham region forms a part of the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation, the Mississauga peoples, and the treaty territory of the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation. It is on these ancestral and treaty lands that we teach, learn, and live. I'd like to move on to our roll call, and we will start with our representatives, beginning with Autism Ontario.
Claudine Burrell from Autism Ontario.
Member at Large, Craig.
Member at Large, Craig Cameron.
Durham Down Syndrome Association. No, missing Tara. Ontario Association for Families of Children with Communication Disorders.
Hi, that's me, Elizabeth Daniel.
Okay, Learning Disabilities Association of Durham Region. No Rowan yet. Voice for Deaf and Hard of Hearing Children. No Kathy yet. Association for Bright Children, Eva Kyriakides, that's me, and SEAC Chair. Member at Large, Carolyn. You're on mute, Carolyn.
Oops. Carolyn McLennan, Member at Large.
Thank you. Easter Seals Ontario. No Hannah yet. Okay, trustees.
Donna Edwards from Town of Ajax.
And Darlene Forbes from City of Oshawa.
Okay, great. Our elementary school representatives.
Sorry, David Robson, Dr. O'Shea Phillips.
Okay, and our secondary school representatives.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Monk from Eastdale in Oshawa.
Okay. All right, and our staff. Starting with Andrea.
Good evening, Andrea McCauley, Superintendent for Inclusive Student Services, and Eva Rowan has joined the link as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'll circle back to Rowan.
And Kyla McKee, Special Education Officer.
Great. And Learning Disabilities Association?
Yes, evening, Rowan Jarvis, Learning Disabilities Association, Durham Region. Apologies for being late.
That's okay. Okay, I think I got everybody for the roll call, but I would like to welcome our guests tonight. We have Risa Deer, one of our social workers, Sandra Newton, a psychometrist with the board, and they will be our presenters tonight. We are also supported by Carolyn Usher, Chief of Social Services, and Sarah Schlein, our senior psychologist, along with Lisa Wright, our new assistant for inclusive student services. All right, moving on to approval of the agenda. Everybody in favor of approving the agenda, or can we get a motion to approve the agenda? Sorry. Donna, seconded by Darlene. All in favor? Okay, motion passed. Has everybody had a chance to review our minutes from our January 21st meeting? And if so, do you have any questions or concerns with them before moving forward? Okay, if there's no questions with regards to the minutes, can we have a motion to pass the minutes? Claudine, seconded by Elizabeth. All in favor? Okay, motion passed. So we are going to move on to our Inclusive Student Services report. A summary has been emailed out, and Kyla McKee will be presenting for that.
Thanks, Eva. Hopefully everybody is seeing my screen. And I haven't yet figured out in Zoom how to manage to see you and the screen at the same time. So hopefully if there's a problem, somebody will just turn on their mic and let me know. But you should see a slide right now that indicates it's the services, Inclusive Student Services Department update. And just an overview of what is covered in the slides that you have. I have organized them slightly differently than what you have in your package, but certainly the content is the same. And so within the package, you will see information around our school closures and reopens, School Mental Health Ontario Mental Health Action Kit, the launch of a new resource, which we've got some presenters here this evening to share with us. We have some important community partnerships happening with our Transition to Work program. I'll give you some more information about a focus on mental health and staff wellness, an excellence in practice that's included from our speech and language pathologists, and then that we've started the process around our next year special education classes and programming supports for students with special education strengths and needs. We will see yet again a shift to some remote learning. We have a number of shifts that have happened in January to continuously reflect and respond to the students who are moving over to our virtual schools or are learning from home. And so just indicating the shift in supports there. We will also see on February 22nd, additional hundreds of students moving over at the elementary panel. And so just linking back to that information is just the priority that we're placing on the transition planning and the activation of all Inclusive Student Services team members, certs in both the current building and the, we call the bricks and mortar building, and then also the virtual school, so that that is a soft or warm transfer for students, making sure that they're aware of their needs as they move over, with particular attention being paid to those students who do have IEPs. School Mental Health Ontario and our leadership from Stephanie Palbor as our mental health lead has launched another resource. There's a wide variety of resources that are available from Student Mental Health, School Mental Health Ontario. And so this is a mental health action toolkit. And we've had a number of important sessions. Stephanie's connecting with different layers of staff members. So we met with certs online as sort of an opportunity to review the toolkit and dig into it a little bit deeper. She's done the same with our administrators and really looking at hearing from them plans around how we can support the understanding of what's available in the toolkit and rolling it out across the system. So we're continuing to look at ways where that will be a resource that's revisited and supported in terms of its implementation. We do have a presentation coming tonight on this wonderful new resource that's being launched. So I won't delve into these slides too deeply, except to acknowledge that we do have Risa and Sandra here, supported by Carolyn and Sarah, in a presentation about this resource. So we'll learn more about that as we go. And wanted to highlight, many of you are familiar with our Transition to Work program, which is a supported work experience program for students in 18 and over who have cognitive or developmental disabilities. And with the closures due to COVID and the changing and shifting landscape, we've had to really pivot this and adapt this program for the students in terms of what the program typically offers. But it's presented a wonderful opportunity for partnerships with our community partners. And through the support of Sade Balajobi and Braden Sherwood, who are our supports to this program, we've gathered some additional supports from partners such as CARIA, and Community Living has done one, and we're looking at leveraging them even through the spring. But there was one in particular that was recently done on stress management. And these are live virtual sessions for students in our Transition to Work program and the educational assistants and teachers who support these classes to be able to participate in the workshop, ask some questions, but continue to look at relevant programming, recognizing that typically these would be students who 4 out of 5 days a week would be in their work placements. and due to COVID and school closures, we've made some adjustments. So we just wanted to highlight for you that we've managed to find another silver lining in this pandemic and leveraging these great partnerships with our community partners. And really, it's presented an opportunity to get to know a little bit more about other programs and services that they can provide, which will bode well and support us in the future as well. Mental health continues to be a priority, and we recognize that that is for all layers of supports. It's for students and families, it's for our educators, our administrators, and our community and beyond. So we continue to focus on ways to be able to support mental health and wellness, including that resource that I previously mentioned. We did have a couple of sessions that have been offered and are continuing to be offered around mental health awareness, stress reduction, and overcoming burnout as we, in the education world, along with all members of our community and families, continue to have to pivot, shift, change, respond to needs that are just continuing to evolve through the course of these months and weeks. Bell Let's Talk Day was celebrated or acknowledged on January 28th and was a great opportunity for us to continue to move our vision into action and develop a wide variety of opportunities. There were a number of posts in a variety of social media, both at the school level as well as at the system level, and really important activities and an opportunity to share this important focus on highlighting the importance of reducing stigma and gaining connections and acceptance around mental health. This was the professional practice that I mentioned around speech and language pathologists, and they're going to be connecting with some American partners and looking at accessing a video that was produced on phonemic awareness. Our SLP team also has some other social media presence that's providing some great connections for families around activities and supports that can be done with their children at home. We are in the midst of the 2021-2022 school year planning around special education programs. It is a very intensive and comprehensive planning opportunity and involves a number of departments all getting together for collaboration. And so we work very hard to look at the many layers around programming, but also have highlighted the focus on mainstream as the most inclusive, and then looking at the layers of partnership and consideration for our small classes. And we'll have more to be able to bring back to SEAC as that process evolves. February is Psychology Month, and their slogan of "We're here to help" has been layered into some great presentations, posters, and resources. And we're excited to have members of this team with us here as well tonight. So acknowledging February as Psychology Month. And then the last piece as part of the report is that there are some tremendous resources we continue to develop as a department and as a system around connecting with your mental health team and the layers of mental health support that are available in the DDSB. And as part of that connection, and particularly to February as Psychology Month, we have a short video to share with you this evening. And I'm really hoping it works.
Hi, we're your DDSB Psychological Services team, and we're here to help.
It's our job to bring psychology to schools to help students with their mental health and well-being, as well as their ability to show what they know and be the best they can be.
To do so, we offer a number of services to meet the needs of students with mental health, social, behavioral, learning, or developmental challenges.
For example, one of our primary jobs is to provide consultation to schools, students, parents and caregivers, and community partners. We try to take a holistic approach to planning and providing care for students to help them feel better about themselves, to do better in school, and to develop in the best way possible.
This may mean that we offer specific assessments of students' needs as related to their mental health, their behavior and social functioning, their learning skills, or their level of development. In all types of assessment, we aim to keep a focus on students to figure out what works best for them.
We also work directly with students individually or in groups to help them with their mental health needs or to help them grow socially and behaviorally. We work in partnership with the students, the adults who support them, other DDSB professional services, and our community partners.
Sometimes, Psychological services staff need to respond to urgent or crisis situations related to traumatic events, tragedies, suicidal risk, or threats of violence. Our job is to support schools, students, and families at these times when coping skills are pressed and when there's a need to help stabilize the situation.
Finally, Psychological Services is always keen to help educational staff, parents and caregivers, and even students themselves in developing key skills that can help students have positive school experiences and to do well in school. We do this through presentations, workshops, online learning modules, and podcasts aimed to increase staff, caregiver, and student capacity and to broaden the scope of understanding of psychological principles to help students in their everyday lives.
Most importantly, we strive to provide these services with a focus on equity and anti-racism.
So feel free to speak to your school about accessing your psychological services team.
We're here to help.
We are here to help.
We're here to help. Just reach out to us.
And that concludes our Inclusive Student Services update. Are there any questions?
Oh, Darlene?
Thank you, Eva. So thank you for the presentation. I did have just two quick questions. I know that the SLP involvement and the video, I'm really interested to learn more about that, because I remember from my time with the Learning Disability Association, it was often phonemic awareness was often, really crucial to build in kids with LD, and the SLPs were really critical. So I really would love to hear more about that. And can anyone access your podcasts, and where do we get them if we can?
Thank you. Eva, through you. So what we'd be happy to do is have our Chief of Speech, Language and Hearing, Lisa Drake, put a little bit of a context to the video, and then share the link out with all members of SEAC. And then respectfully, with our senior psychologist on the line this evening, I would ask Sarah, as lead for the podcast project, to perhaps answer your question on that one. Sorry, Sarah, is that all right?
Sure. Thank you so
Okay.
much. Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you and to support my colleagues this evening. Thank you so much for your question about the podcasts. We're really excited about them. Right now, we have only one episode that's finished production. We've had a little bit of a stall because of pandemic and needing, it's difficult to record with adequate distance. So once they are available, we have, I think, 10 episodes written. So this is a project that is coming. It is my understanding that the podcasts will be available anywhere that you get podcasts. So from Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, all of those places. And we will, I'm sure, be able to advertise them through our social media and our amazing communications team in the department as well.
Thanks, Sarah. So as soon as those go live, we'll make sure to include them in information to SEAC. And John popped on the chat box and did confirm, Sarah, you're absolutely right in terms of the sourcing, but we'll send direct links and notification to SEAC. It's an excellent project with tremendous, the potential is just so great, especially around our adolescents, and a direct reach out in a media format that's so highly accessible and within their vernacular as well. So I think it's really great, and for our parent caregivers as well. So really looking forward to them.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Any other questions? I'm just double checking our chat here. Okay. If we don't have any more questions, then we can move on to our staff report, starting with our administration report with Andrea McCauley.
Great, thank you, Eva. So through you. So this evening for SEAC, we would like to welcome Lisa Rai. Lisa Rai is the successful candidate who will transition with Diane in the weeks ahead. Lisa will bring experiences and knowledge gained through previous roles in payroll, community use of schools, and has also held positions at 4 different schools within our board in 4 different municipalities. In addition to that, she will bring a personal passion for mental health and well-being to the role as well. So please join me in welcoming and congratulating Lisa this evening. On the flip side of that, we also look forward to celebrating Diane's immense contributions to the department, Grove, and SEAC. And we look forward to a presentation during our March meeting. And Eva and I have already been in a little bit of cahoots on that one, and we'll be sending out some information to SEAC. So as Kyla referenced, we've had continued shifts for our kids and our families. And on February 8th, our schools reopened to all in-person learners. And we just really like to thank educators across all roles, including our administrators online with us this evening, who supported in-person learning for students with special education needs during the school closures. We also thank the teams that moved quickly to shift to virtual learning and then made the switch back to in-person when the province announced the timing of school openings, which included Durham region. And the teams did that over a weekend to reopen schools for our kids. Currently, our elementary schools are in the midst of a final transition date for students moving between in-person and DDSB at home. Planning, as Kyla referenced, has included a focus on sharing IEPs for important continuity of programming for our kids in either transition point. Our educators continue to support student well-being and learning. Our Inclusive Student Services team members provide essential supports for inclusion, accommodation, and clinical services. All of the teams in Inclusive Student Services are currently engaged in examining our practices and processes within our commitments to shift to ensuring centering human rights and equity in our work. Our commitment to shifts to ensure anti-oppressive practices included a department-wide participation in a session yesterday led by Dr. Nicole West-Burns, who guided reflection on thinking about where processes and practices currently decentralize students, and we're looking at moving students, including their identity and belonging and mattering to ensure at the center of everything. PAC and SEAC for February includes an IEP update, a review of any proposed changes for programs and services, and a review of parent and caregiver resources to ensure that they're user-friendly and easy to understand. So an update of our data with students with IEPs was provided in our January minutes with a few contextual pieces of how students are accessing learning, either in person or through DDSB at home. And we'll include those in the December minutes as well for alignment with PAC on SEAC. As Kyla referenced, planning for the 21-22 school year has commenced, and in consultation with families, schools have submitted new placement or placement change requests for students to access special education class programs. We are currently working across a number of departments to build the special education plan into the next school year, and that included a full day of planning today with one of our teams. Consideration at this time includes possibility of virtual-based programs, continuity of lower enrollment programs with a commitment to engage consultation process toward 22-23 decision-making to make sure that parent and community voice are engaged in any significant change. And we look forward to bringing updates to SEAC on planning as we move through the months ahead. We are tracking to hit targets for staffing timelines. The team has adjusted with the school closures and is making good pace while keeping individual student-centered conversations at the core of that. Today as well, we were releasing 2 documents. So to support school teams in planning for next year, we've released 2 documents. One is transition planning for students with special education strengths and needs, 2021, and the other is identification placement review committee process, a planning guide for school teams, 2021 as well. They were uploaded to Spark, which is our internal staff resource today, and shared out with Inclusive Student Services, and will be shared broadly with administrators and our certs on Monday. We will be sharing both of those documents that have AODA compliance built into both with SEAC following the meeting as well. So this is our administrative report for February 2021, and happy to take any questions.
Do we have any questions for Andrea?
Thank you.
Okay, if there's no questions for Andrea, then we can move on to our board report with Donna.
Basically, we had a presentation actually for Definitely Durham and for the World of Me and I Forgive Me. We had 4 inductees for Definitely Durham, and I cannot remember them, and they're not on the website. I just went to look, and they're not there. I haven't posted yet, but they represent quite a diverse, both in geography and different pathways that they have taken. And we're quite pleased and proud of our Durham graduated students and what they have achieved. We basically also had a presentation which you can also on the student census data, as well as an update on the anti-Black racism strategy update, which I'm sure you'll find out a little bit more as we go on in the SEAC agenda. We looked at, believe it or not, the release and consultation of next year's school calendar. We did talk about the change of this calendar and some of the things that we still have to work out with the change of March break to April. There's a few things that we still have to work out. And then we have also talked about preliminary planning for budget for next year. We have a preliminary schedule of dates, and the reason why I call it preliminary, although they're set there, we all know that the dates for our finance meetings can change because we never know for sure when the Grants for Students Needs, the GSNs, will be released by the Ministry of Education. And our dates do reflect that. But what you'll find that as far as the dates are concerned, that we have allocated time to get input on the budget prior to the budget. So for public consultation, really prior to us developing the actual budget, so that people have feedback into where you think our priorities are based on, again, our strategic plan. So I'm just trying to think. For your information, there is basically a public presentation on Wednesday, May 19th. As far as the overview of these are planned dates as far as the overview of the GSN. There will also be a public meeting, of course, on June 2nd. And then if required, another one has been set for June 9th. So that hopefully we'll be able to approve our budget in the last board meeting in June. But again, these are all tentative dates based on whatever the Ministry of Education decides on releasing the GSNs. And that is my report.
Donna, sorry.
Yes.
I do have those names.
Oh, good. Thank you, Darlene.
No problem. Is that okay?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Go ahead.
So we have Jeff Warburton, who was from Pickering. He's a singer-songwriter, and he's collaborated with Shawn Mendes, and he's I'm sure my daughter knows who he is. I'm far too old and not hip enough, I'm sure. And then Christine Elliott, the Minister of Health, who is from Whitby. We had Jessica Phoenix, who is a competitive equestrian from Uxbridge. And I presented posthumously, sadly, for Dale Howarchuk, but his sister, Dana, accepted. So thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Darlene, for that. And thank you, Donna, for your report. Does anybody have any questions for Donna or with respect to the board report? No? Okay, then we can move on to number 9, our presentation regarding addressing anti-Black racism and its impacts, a well-being toolkit for families being presented by Risa Deer and Sandra Newton.
Thank you. Risa and Sandra, are you okay to jump in? I think one of the most impressive pieces around this critical document is the responsiveness to community and how our staff has come together to be responsive, noting not only impacts in current time, but the longstanding trauma to families, and how we keep being, unfortunately, reminded with global incidents of just how important it is to look after the well-being of our students and our families, and equip for really essential conversations to be happening in households across the region, both with families who identify as Black and allies in moving forward together and recognizing harm, risk to well-being, and then building resiliencies and supports in place. And the team's done an incredible job at putting together a really thorough resource. I feel privileged to learn from Risa and Sandra and their leadership of this committee. And I'm really proud of the work that they'll be sharing tonight. All right, would you like the PowerPoint started?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. And Risa, I'm returning to you, Risa.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for having us join you this evening. We are very excited to present this resource to you. So as Andrea indicated, our title is Addressing Anti-Black Racism and its Effect and its Impact. Actually, sorry, that should say a Wellbeing Toolkit for Families. If you wouldn't mind moving to the next slide, please, Andrea. Thank you. Over the last year, we have all had to deal with the challenges of COVID-19, and collectively, we are grieving many losses in many forms. For the Black community, we are also having to continue to navigate the detrimental effects of anti-Black racism. In May of last year, the very public death of George Floyd was a very visual and powerful reminder of the existence of anti-Black racism and the disregard for Black lives. What we know about the impact of anti-Black racism is that there is a growing body of research that shows that it can cause racial trauma. The presenting symptoms of racial trauma resulting from ongoing exposure to anti-Black racism has shown to be very similar to those symptoms of PTSD. We also know that this ongoing exposure can also cause intergenerational trauma. Since last spring and into this school year, Black parents have come forward expressing their concerns and their fears for their children, not just in the community, but in the school system as well. Students returned to school in September, asking their teachers how is the school planning to respond. And teachers have also come forward asking for resources. With that said, members of the Social Work and Psychological Services Department came together wanting to provide support to DDSB's Black students and families. The Wellbeing Toolkit was designed to support them in providing an abundance of resources that affirm and validate their lived experiences, speak to the negative impact of anti-Black racism and the harm it could cause, and seek to build positive racial identities, especially for our students. However, we also believe that all communities can benefit from this resource. For non-Black and non-racialized community members, it can serve to increase their awareness of anti-Black racism and its impact, provide greater insight into how to become allies, and the hope is that they too will speak up and out against anti-Black racism. Overall, the resources found within can serve to foster meaningful conversations around race and racism with students at school and at home. So without further ado, I will pass it over to my colleague to share more about this resource.
Thank you very much, Risa. I have the honor now of doing a bit of a walkthrough of the document, and just to reference what Risa has shared, and thank you, Andrea, that's a perfect spot. Just to reference what's been shared, you know, Risa's given us the background and the inspiration behind the work of the collective. Andrea nodded to just what an exciting collaborative opportunity this provided between social work and psychological services departments. I thought just before getting into the content, I would share a bit more about who we are. Represented here is the work, the thinking, the heart of Black, White, Latinx community members. We're a diverse group, and this collective absolutely came together with centering Black families and families in general and the needs that they have at this time. So again, great starting point. As I walk through the material, I'm hoping just to give you a bit of a tour if we were to be on a bit of an overview. And I do hope that what you see here will be inspiring, will be something that you too are proud of. It represents all of our intentions and hopes for the best for our families. So this first slide is an important one because we know how powerfully images communicate things, don't we? Concepts, feelings, information, often better than words can. Where words fail, pictures accomplish so much. And this is where I really get the chance to acknowledge the help and support and just amazing skills of our DDSB communications and creative services teams. They took special care to honor our requests and wishes for diverse representation through images. And before you are just a few that you will see in the toolkit that has been shared with you. It is in draft form, which is why we've asked that folks wait for the final, but you will see snippets of it as I go through here. And we also are thinking about the group we're speaking with tonight. An honor to certainly present before you and to know that you also will be looking out for those signs of representation. It matters so much. Differences culturally, differently abled individuals, diverse families. There are so many people that we consider our audience for a document like this. And again, hope you'll enjoy those features. And Andrea, would you mind the next slide, please? And I'll just get into the exploration. This is the cover. Again, photos communicating so much, but I'll get into some of the text as well in the next few minutes we have. Next slide, please. Thank you. Really, the front matter of this toolkit begins with a note to our families. We want them to know that we've been thinking of them and we understand as well as we can some of what they've been going through during this very unusual time, and then the added challenges we've spoken about, longstanding and new challenges around anti-Black racism. So it does provide them with that view, a sense of our motivations. And on the next slide, you'll actually see that there's also a glossary. We have borrowed from a number of sources, including board resources, to make sure that families understand the terms that we're using and where those come from as we reference them throughout the document. So just some of the features at the front. Next slide, please, Andrea, where we'll get into the mental health impacts. So important not to miss what Risa mentioned earlier, that there is an impact on mental health, on well-being, the focus of the work we do clinically, you know, of anti-Black racism and its cumulative effects. There are so many outcomes, behaviors, things that we need to understand within the context of what is happening. And we're hoping that the readers of our guide will benefit from the definitions, will better understand the impact of racial trauma, and also the need for systems to shift in order for some of the changes that we need to have happen. The next slide, please. Here, I think we're getting into one of our favorite parts. Risa may agree. We have, as I said, many people in our collective, but we enjoyed assembling books. We understand that understanding history is an essential point and part of understanding current events and even thinking about where we're going. And there are an abundance of books for children, youth, young adults. We also included podcasts and other articles and videos, just again trying to put things in a central place that we're going to meet the needs of families as they've identified to us. Next slide, please. Also featured, especially in these very bold green panels, you'll see them throughout the toolkit, are these quotes, ones that we hope tie into the theme of the section, but also convey a very powerful message about possibility and belief in the inherent strength of Black people and our ability as people to change things for the better. Next slide, please. More about the books and again, descriptions just to help people quickly locate what they might need. And again, one of our favorite images there. Thanks, Andrea. And we'll keep going. Thank you. We understand that as we try to educate, as we try to inform, we also need to acknowledge that parents need some concrete, caregivers need some concrete tools for coming right back to those conversations with their children that we had in mind when creating this in the first place. What are some ways to foster a positive racial identity amid so many challenging circumstances? What could it look like to increase and build positive self-esteem? What are some of the tools, the activities? What's some of the language that could be used? So we're hoping that the books and videos and other things that we've assembled here will help parents in that direction. Next slide, please. We also did not want to forget the caregivers that are seeing their families through these times and themselves have needs. As we talked about mental health, we wanted to focus on things that would increase self-care. And there are a number of tools out there, but again, this is a way of bringing things together and making sure that it's handy for our readers. Next slide, please. And as Risa mentioned, we really wanted to make sure that people had at their fingertips a range of supports in the community to meet all kinds of needs. I selected a couple of here that you might not expect to find in a toolkit like this. Information about food and housing security, health services, community and social services, educational services. There are a number of things collected here. I hope that many will find at least some of the things that they're looking for and some things they might not even have known about. Again, the providers tend to be those that are focusing on users of service users of Black descent, but again, services available to anyone that would like to connect with them and find out more. Next slide, please, Andrea. Now that I've just given you maybe the quickest walkthrough ever, and I know that you'll have time to look through the toolkit on your own, just wanted to share our steps from here. We did present this implementation plan, and we're in the middle of it right now, actually coming to an exciting point. We realize that we've really got three groups here. We've got students, we've got and their families, we've got our system, and we've got the community that we want to target in our sharing of this resource. And the next slide actually is going to provide a bit more about our next steps. If you would. Thanks, Andrea. Including the fact that next week is going to be our official launch. This includes social media, I believe they're called bursts, I'm going to say it, and display and sharing on the website, sending through schools who are going to be our partners in getting this to families and whom we're also going to support in terms of implementation. We've been invited to the Parent Involvement Committee's event on February 24th, which I heard has got several hundred people registered. So what a great opportunity for us just to even have a few minutes to share a bit about this and what families can expect. And anticipated outcomes, I hope that those are clear. They are educational, they are supportive, they are awareness raising, and as a living document, we really do hope that we will continue to be able to add to this and respond to what the community wants to see in a resource like this. So thank you, Andrea. I think that my next slide thanks everyone. This is my chance, if I could just borrow a few seconds more to just say how much we have enjoyed and appreciated the support of our chiefs of psychology and social work, our superintendent, Andrea. Thank you so much. And what a pleasure it's been just to be able to collaborate on something that we hope is going to make a huge difference and show our families how much at the center of all of our work they are. So thank you. I wonder if there are any questions for us.
I think, sorry, Eva, if you're okay with it, and Sandra and Risa, thank you so much. This has been a resource that the team's been so dedicated and thoughtful in putting together, and the two of you leading it, just fantastic. I think Carolyn has a couple words that she's just going to tie in as appreciation to the two of you, and then we'll turn it back over to our chair to navigate the questions. Carolyn?
Thank you, Andrea, and thank you to Risa and Sandra for a great presentation. I've heard it a few times, and it just every time I get chills because this work is so important. I'm really happy to stand alongside and to have my hand on your back as we move forward with this. I think it's really, really important work. But I also want to say that it's so exciting because this, to me, as somebody kind of new to the board, newish, it is really important that we're able to see this is where we're going. This is one piece in a very clear commitment the board has to this work and to supporting our students, and I think, and our families in particular. So it is a beginning step and something really tangible that, as our presenters talked about, it's a living document, and it's just the beginning of an ongoing commitment. And so I'm really excited about this. I'm excited for this board, and I'm excited to see where we go with it. So thank you for the great presentation, and as our presenter said, Andrea, thank you for your support and your stewardship of this this great resource. So anyway, I will stop talking and over to any questions you might have.
Do we have any questions with respect to this? It was a fabulous presentation, actually. Well, I have the mic. I just want to say that I really appreciate it. Do we have any questions from SEAC with respect to the presentation? Darlene, go ahead.
Yes, excellent presentation. I really do appreciate the work that's gone into it, and the aspect of it being living. And I was wondering about the feedback. So I like that, you know, that it's encouraging a dialogue and that idea and a partnership. So I just thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Would you like us to say a bit about how we anticipate getting feedback, or?
Yeah, that would be wonderful if you could. I didn't want to, I didn't want to take you by surprise or anything.
Oh, no, thank you for the question. And Risa, please jump in. I know that we do want that, and we've been thinking about some ways to get that. I know that one of the things we're hoping to do, just apart from the communication that families may do through their schools to reach us, to also have times where we may be able to present it. Actually, we're thinking about that. We've talked about an email address. We've talked about a number of ways, and we have to land on the one that would be most effective and helpful and allow us to be most responsive. But I do hope that we will make it clear as part of this process how we may be reached so that we can address the things that people raise. I think it would be unfortunate to kind of put it out there and then not have that part B or whatever else people need. So I hope that they'll know that we are here and available and reachable, findable. If I could, I realize that we also have Dr. Schlein here today, and I want to just thank her for being here to support, and she's been a wonderful ally in this journey also. Thanks.
Thank you so much. That's fantastic. Do we have any other questions for Sandra or Risa? Carolyn?
Sorry, I just had to unmute myself. It's more of a comment. I really, I was taking a look at the draft before the meeting, and I was just very impressed by the depth and the breadth of the resources that are in here. You know, some not just in Durham region, but a little bit further reaching that I'm aware of just in the community and different things. So I really, I'm kind of excited that this initiative, this resource is available to people, and it covers so many things. I think the mental health aspect is really important, but then again, some of the other community resources for people so that they can, you know, meet their needs where they are. So thank you for creating this resource. I'm really excited to sort of see where this goes and see how we can support you in making sure that people really make use of it. So thank you.
Thank you. I think that's what's called music to our ears. We absolutely would love your partnership in making sure that families receive this, and just having that feedback from you now means the world. Thank you.
That's excellent. Thank you. Andrea? Go ahead.
Just on that as well, one of the things that Risa and Sandra, in providing their leadership to the development and then the sharing of this resource, are going to be providing a voiceover so that their phenomenal overview of the resource, which grounds it in the why, the connections of service, and that opening to resources both that can center within a home and the community, and then that two-way. We really want that voice and message to carry with the document not to sit flat, and encourage people to dive in. And so one of the things we had talked about was that being part of our in-system rollout. I hope Risa and Sandra, it's okay to commit that we would also share that link with SEAC, so that if you're sharing within your organizations, then that contextual piece that sits alongside the document could go then with it through. Appreciate sharing once it goes to full release, if you don't mind. Sorry, Sandra. Risa says, okay, we're expanding your audiences.
Thank you. We appreciate that. Absolutely. Thank you.
That's great. Craig?
Yes. Remarkable. Absolutely remarkable. I will be absolutely appropriating this this document for use at Trent University. There are Black student associations at our school. There are a number of other student groups that I'm sure would be tremendously interested in this document. Just for its resources alone are just spectacular. And so I just echo everything everybody been saying about, and commend you on the work on this document, and this this whole process must have been quite the endeavor. And yeah, we'll definitely be, I think Andrea said, you know, extending its its access to many different places. So thank you for your hard work on this.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments with respect to this presentation? I'd like to thank you both again. It was a fantastic presentation, and I've gone through it, but I'm really interested in looking at some more of those resources myself. I think it's a phenomenal topic, and when it's released broader, I look forward to bringing it to my high school's SEAC as attention as well, and making sure that they're knowing, the more people who know that it's there and available, it will be fantastic. So thank you so much. Appreciate it. Go ahead, Andrea.
Sorry, just one more on that as well. Because the team was so thorough and thoughtful in terms of the resources that they've brought forward as well, we are looking at using some of our mental health dollars to ensure that many of the resources are in every single one of our schools, so that if families are seeking, that access is not a barrier. So to our administrators online, stay tuned. We're hoping to get some great information out to you shortly about that to support.
Love that. Love that. Okay. Thank you very much. We really appreciate that. And I guess we'll be moving on to our open discussion period now with respect to the discussions around underestimating children with a disability, sort of how to navigate when parents and or students feel a child's being underestimated or undervalued. And I do think, to a degree, when we start with this discussion, that it does tie into even some of the presentation previous as well. I'm not sure if we just want to, sort of go around and share our thoughts on some situations that maybe we're aware of, and what we would think about doing to or advice we'd be giving on to parents on how to navigate that, and how to sort of address that situation. Does anybody want to share any thoughts with regards to that? Claudine, go ahead. Yeah.
Yes, in my work capacity, I have talked to parents about the collaboration in the IEP and the ability to review that document as the year goes on and make adjustments to it. Oftentimes parents receive the IEP, read it and then sign it and give it back. But its intention, in my understanding, is it's supposed to be a collaborative document where the parent can give input, strategies, and goals, right? And if those goals for your child are represented in the IEP, it gives a parent a more solid standing when they're trying to now work on the implementation of the strategies within their settings.
Yes, thank you, Claudine. I with that, and I think one of the big things for parents to take into consideration is that especially that first IEP that comes home in the first 30 days of school, there's a lot being done at a school at one time, those IEPs. So they tend to often just mirror what was at the end of the year before. And it's really important that as something arises and you see something's not working, or you see a situation where you see a need something needs to be addressed or changed, to contact your CERT, contact the teacher, and have that discussion right away. Because I know I've had many revisions to IEPs for my children along the way for exactly that reason. A situation arose that we didn't anticipate, and we needed to put something in that would address that, so for the future. So I think that's really important. Go ahead, Rowan.
Just sort of as an add-on, how does that look through the lens of the pandemic? Like, does the access to certs and to everybody to sort of, make that document a living document, I'm sure it still exists, but in what capacity? I would imagine it's a little bit different.
Go ahead, Andrea.
If one of our administrators doesn't mind us putting them on the spot, I don't know, we'll go to elementary, Pete or Dave, if you want to talk about access and how your families are connecting with you and your team. And then Kai, if you could follow it up from a central perspective of our teams, that'd be great.
Can you hear me? The communication with our certs are, I'm at a school in the north in Brock Township, and we're quite a small community, but our cert has a great connection with all of our students who have IEPs, and this year through the pandemic, it's been a lot of phone calls, a lot of emails, and a lot of collaboration between parents, teachers, and our cert to develop IEPs and to revise them and see what works best for the particular student. So, I don't know if Dave has anything to add there, but from a different location in the board. But
I think you hit it on the head there, Peter. I think it's the relationships that we already have developed with our families, our kids and our parents. The pandemic has made things a little more difficult, but maintaining that communication, instead of having drop-ins and coming into the school, it's a little more phone calls and Zoom, Google Meets. But, once that relationship is there, I know in our school and in Peter's school as well, it's an open door, and, we're always available to talk and discuss and have those conversations. Although I will say, I agree. I think that a lot of parents don't understand the back and forth and the two-way street that an IEP is. And maybe that's something that we need to kind of promote and get that conversation going. I think a lot of people get intimidated by the length and the complexity of an IEP sometimes. And I think we need to do as much as we can to kind of open those doors and have those conversations, make sure they understand what it entails and what their role is and the piece that they have to play. So, but I think it all goes back to relationships and having those communications, those conversations pre-pandemic, because we knew it was going to come. So.
And I'll just piggyback on a couple of those pieces. Also recognizing we had thousands of students move to a virtual campus, and many of their school teams would be unfamiliar to them as families. And so the importance of leveraging a partnership and collaboration with bricks and mortar teams who would be more familiar. And sometimes they were sort of that bridge between the school and team that they were familiar with, and being able to get to know the team that was now taken care of and looking after, especially for those students who transitioned through the year as opposed to having done so to start the school year. And so those pieces are really important. To Dave's point, the added piece around that understanding of an IEP, and even now in these recent weeks around the connection between IEPs and report cards, And so one of the things we have done is revisited that resource around helping parents and families understand the connection between them both, and through feedback from SEAC and families across the system and educators across the system, we very much simplified the document in terms of its language and making sure it was more accessible, but also gave some more examples. And we're hoping that as providing resources like that one that gave a lot of information, but we were hoping in a much more meaningful way, that we break down some of the barriers around, EduSpeak and some vocabulary that may be more extensive or unfamiliar. And then that allows families to feel more confident and comfortable in asking some of those questions. And then Andrea spoke earlier about us as an entire department and system engaging and really looking at our current procedures and practices. The IEP would be another place tied to interventions and accommodations, where we are really looking at understanding identity as an important part of an IEP development and strategy development. And so we're really looking at building our capacity as a staff to better do that kind of work in schools with families, and hoping that that opens up doors and encourages a stronger collaboration and partnership for families to feel like they can have that voice. Because to Dave and Pete's comments around the relationship between the families and the schools is the number one way to get that voice heard. And so we know how important that is. And looking at, we're always looking for silver linings of the pandemic, but one thing that has offered an opportunity is us having to pivot to virtual sessions for collaboration around IEPs, around IPRC reviews, around meetings with families. Some families weren't able to get to the school for some of those meetings based on schedules and other barriers. So technology has become a new opportunity for many families, while also recognizing in places like the North, technology can be a barrier just in terms of their remote signals and lack of access to internet. So I think it's taught us the importance of having a variety of ways to connect with families and to continue to keep opening up those doors and keep providing different means for communication. And we've tried hard to have families have the voice about what does work for them. So we're not saying all families are getting, for instance, their IEP through email. If that's not something that works for you, parents have the ability to have it mailed to them instead. So just looking at a variety of ways to keep those options open and really recognize what families will need. So I think it's important to keep doing that work. I think we're still in early stages of having families feel confident and comfortable in advocating and feeling like we can continue to revisit the IEP in particular over and over and over again. But again, that silver lining of COVID and the many students who've been moving and having to pivot and change to support what families need has also allowed us to really focus in on smaller, tangible, meaningful goals that can be revisited and added to over the course of a year, rather than making a decision about the whole term's worth or semester's worth of learning at the front end. We're building it as we go, which is much more responsive to what the student need is and the assessment that's providing the information to us.
Great, thank you, Kyla. Donna, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with what Claudine and a few of you have said around the whole collaboration of in the IEP and ensuring that when there's an issue, no matter what, if they're feeling uncomfortable or understanding, that is to have that discussion. And that discussion's got to be provided in a safe and trusting environment for the parent, and involve the child as well, if whatever you can, because it's the student's voice, because the student's the one in the classroom, the student's the one that they feel, and whenever you can, and if they're able to get them involved and they're comfortable as well in that. And I know Dave has dealt with me as a difficult parent. But no, and I found that my Mimosa self is that collaborative and sort of that understanding and the sharing of information from a parent's perspective, and that's where the trust comes involved. Is that I know that when I shared any information that I got or I knew of, And it could be just, you know what, there's a change, and it's feeling that comfortable, trusting, right? We're saying, hey, there's something that's been happening in this that I think this is going to affect. You know, so therefore we might have to change our strategies in the IEP. So it's that collaboration is really key, and the updating of the information. If, I guess from the parents' perspective, if they don't feel they have that, that's where that comfortable thing, that's, you know, it's hard, because that's when things start breaking down, that communication starts breaking down. So what can individuals do to ensure that they have that comfortable? And one of the things that I have seen still is that when a parent brings somebody in just to sit beside them because they're not comfortable, they may not understand, just to help them have a second set of ears, sometimes that still is seen a little bit as a threat, you know, as far as because they brought somebody else in, and that's not the purpose of that. It's just so that they feel comfortable, right? And that so it's that whole trust and that communication is really, really key.
Yeah, I would agree. Darlene?
Sorry, I don't know if Rowan, did you want to go first, or are you? I thought I saw your hand up, so I don't know. I don't want to take your.
No. You go ahead. You ahead.
Thanks. And I was just speaking with a friend who is not in this district, but her son is getting ready for the transition from elementary to high school, and all of that goes with it. So one of the things that I really recommended for her to do was to get her son really comfortable with his IEP. And even I remember at a learning disabilities presentation years ago, and I'm looking for the resource, I'll have to reach out to see if they can give it to me, but a little like Reader's Digest or a little tiny version of the IEP, just hitting the highlights of, you know, strengths, areas of needs, or accommodations, just really brief, so that the kid, and just like on a little business card, nothing conspicuous, so that, you know, try to get him comfortable with he has an IEP, there's nothing to be ashamed about it, but also realize that as you go to a high school, so many more students, so many students with multiple IEPs, it doesn't always hurt to just refresh a memory of your teachers because they have so much going on that could be helpful. And the other thing I was thinking about the question is that sometimes, you know, I had a parent talk to me about just, this is an IEP related, but this is just a neurodiversity kind of related bit, in that, you know, this child who had been diagnosed with ADHD couldn't remember to bring their soccer cleats to practice, and were given multiple chances, you know, and it was a requirement to be on the team. And for whatever reason, and this could be intersectionality as well. I mean, there's a whole lot why a student might forget their cleats. But then even though it was gifted at soccer, wasn't given a chance to be on the team. So I just think the more we have discussions like this, and the realizations that, you know, people's, you know, whatever's going on in their lives, and there could be multiple things that impact, to have a sensitivity to that, and to, you know, so that student wasn't able to perform and maybe achieve and maybe participate really fully in the life of the school because of something or several things that were impacting his ability to remember to bring his cleats. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Darlene. Rowan, I know you had your hand up next. Yeah, go ahead.
No problem. I think I'm somewhat systems oriented, and I hear the term building relationships. And once you have the relationship strong, everything flows, and that's great. I think I'm curious, how does the relationship get built in the first place? Like, how do you go from zero to the point where the momentum starts? Because once the momentum's going, everything's good, everyone's kicking on the same team, that type of thing. But to get that from a family that say they don't know how to get started, what do the initial contacts look like? How does that relationship get fostered to the point where it becomes a built relationship?
Go ahead, Andrea.
I think Rowan's hit on a really, really important layer to it too, because as you said, once that trust and that kind of communication flow is going, then you can dive deeper into the wonders and getting messy with moving and making changes and things like that. And I think a lot of it links, as Darlene said, there could be other pieces in play. And we know that schools are very structured. And there's a lot of hierarchy within schools that may or may not be comfortable for some families. So I'm just wondering if, like, there's a lot of really great points that you've all brought forward in terms of the discussion topic tonight, in terms of building the student self-advocacy, the collaboration, student voice, and their own awareness and building that. I'm wondering if we take Rowan's question about, so what happens up to the point of developing that relationship, and make that the discussion for our March meeting, and put together some tips and strategies for families. I think contact your SEAC representative will be right near the top of that list. But I wonder if we take Rowan's question and honor it by moving it into kind of that part B in our March agenda. Just food for thought for SEAC.
Yeah, I really like that, because I think there's a lot of discussion around that, and the intimidation factor for a new parent who like a parent who's just new to entering into this whole journey of special education needs and understanding the process and what's going on, and they're overwhelmed often, and don't know that an IEP is a working document, a living document that can be changed and altered as they go along. And I think that's huge. And I think the other factor we need to look at is looking at how do we ensure that dialogue and communication relationship moves forward when there's changes, like changes in admin or changes in certs, because often many parents feel like every year you're reinventing that wheel, building that relationship with the next teacher or the next cert or the next admin, and hoping that they understand those complexities and what they're looking at. Like, for example, as Darlene mentioned with ADHD, that some things that they might see as behavior is truly they're looking at the disabilities. It's the outward sign of an invisible disability that is often mistaken. So yeah, go ahead, Andrea.
Sorry, just seeing Michelle's offer in the chat box as well, which our audience through YouTube would not be able to see. I think that is an excellent pairing to it. So the school, an ability to kind of bring forth what strategies the schools are engaging, and then bring the SEAC voices in terms of that family and community pieces, and putting those together. So I'm wondering if we can put our principal reps on the spot and have some collaboration between elementary and secondary, who could then work with Kyla and Michelle and do the presentation component that would lead then into the open discussion framed by Rowan's question. And then the outcome of that could be a really neat little package for families and caregivers, co-authored by our school teams and SEAC. That'd be I think it'd be a really powerful piece to put some voice to. If that's all right, that would settle our presentation and our open discussion.
Yeah, I think that would be phenomenal if they're great with it, they're good with it. I think that would be great. I think that's moving in a really into a very important conversation that I think most families would appreciate. So just keeping in mind time and the fact that we're going to move ahead with maybe some pointers that we all have, sort of moving forward into next month's discussion about, sort of developing that piece and how to move forward. If there's any other items that or comments you'd like to bring forward on this topic for tonight, to send those in writing to Andrea and Diane and Lisa, and then hopefully we can get those also shared out with SEAC, because we don't want anybody's voice to be missed due to a timeline, because I think that's really important to get all of that out there. Yeah, Kyla, go ahead.
Eva, I just wondered and thought I would offer an opportunity. So one of the things I find in loving to join SEAC is that when we go to open discussion, there's so many ideas that I'm sure each of the members have in their minds. But in the time we have allowed to actually do the work, for lack of a better description, it's not a lot. So what I'm wondering, if it would be helpful, is if we put a Jamboard together and have each of the organizations have their own sort of slide to be able to indicate, what do you hear from families, guardians, and caregivers about their challenges around this topic? And you could give us by populating those thoughts and ideas in advance, and then the principal representatives that we just put on the docket to do some work would be able to think about what parents, caregivers, and guardians are telling you, and then as part of our response and planning, look at, we hear you, and here's what we might want to do about that. And then the offer would be that we could look at even breaking those down into smaller pieces, and rather than have one massive presentation that families might also be overwhelmed by, but instead it would be so you're worried about this. And then we have something smaller that you could share with them. We could post through our own resources and just break it into smaller pieces. That may go a little bit further. So definitely an offer to set up a Jamboard that you could just post these ideas. You could easily share the link with other families and get them populating ideas, whatever works for you as an organization. But I know the Jamboard's been a very helpful virtual resource that is easy to gather because it's like a post-it board. So if that would be helpful to SEAC, I'm more than happy to set that up and share it through Diane to each of you.
Yeah, I think that would be excellent. That would be excellent, because I would love for more, unfortunately time is limited, so that the more we can do to get input in advance and ensure that the discussion is fulsome, I think that would be fantastic. Okay. All right. If we want to move on then to the business arising from the minutes, whether it was to draft letter to the Ministry of Education, and I had mentioned drafting, but then of course we pivoted back to in-person. That related to sort of supports and stuff from the ministry for families of students with special education needs, and I question now. Not that the letters, I think the letter is still very important, but I think it might be in the context of what happens if we have to flip back in the other direction again. Like, we've gone back in person. Now, what are we going to do to ensure that those students, if we have to go back into virtual, are, have the supports that they need from the ministry for their students to be successful? I don't know, does anybody have any thoughts on that? Sorry, I'm just trying to see hands if we have them. Is that something we'd rather do, is to sort of pivot it towards the idea of what happens if, or what kinds of supports we'd like to see if we end up having to flip back? Yeah, go ahead, Caroline.
I guess it's tricky because the changes happen so fast. By the time we, put together a letter or something to address, say, online, then we're back to in person. Then we've got, so I'm not sure if there's a better way for us to address some of these things, because, it takes time to put some of these things together, only to find that the situation has changed again. It's a moving target. It's really hard to to put sort of our time together to put something together, only to find that it doesn't really apply right now. So
yeah, that was sort of the problem that I ran into, and I couldn't get my head around trying to switch it. So, Rowan, yeah, I saw that you had your hand up.
I was just wondering if because unfortunately we've already done it once, and did we put anything in place then as a starting either tips, tricks, or mini document that we can build off of, or are we starting from scratch in that? Because I definitely, to speak to what Carolyn said, it's no one really knows, but at the same time, I think part of the reason we're creating something like this so that should it happen again, we can have something to fall back on. So I'm just wondering if we've started anything along those lines.
Yeah, that was kind of my thinking, right? Go ahead, Andrea.
So thank you very much. So the team, you're right, the pivots come fast, and I think our educators in our classrooms are incredible at making those moves, and administrators leading it. Certainly our innovation team keeps evolving their learning and sharing that out. Because it doesn't just sit within Durham Public, one of the items, and I probably should have included it in the admin report, so I apologize for not doing so, is that the ministry has put together a group of superintendents of special education and made an arrangement with Ottawa University to do research into some of the strategies learned over the past year in that switch to virtual and students with special education needs specifically. And what was lovely is and mental health supports. So what we're seeing now is we used to see special education and we used to see mental health. And now we're seeing well-being and learning coming together in a more integrated way. And so the team from U of Ottawa has reached out within the last week, and we have provided resources from DDSB in terms of what we heard from families and students that worked well, and questions we still have that we'd like them to dig into and gather best practices on. What we had heard from the ministry was that they would gather and essentially compile and turn back to us. And there was a bit of frustration expressed at that because the timeline was that we would have it, they're doing this and then we'll have it by March. And a few of us said, that's great, that's 12 months after we actually started doing this. And so I'm hoping that everybody put some really thoughtful input together, and that the U of Ottawa team will be able to turn that around quite quickly back out to us. When we're in receipt of anything from that team, it will absolutely come to SEAC for your feedback in terms of how different strategies are landing specifically within our community, because each board's context is a bit different. But really glad to see not only just the switch to virtual being examined, but virtual for learners with special education strengths and needs, and that provincial conversation with that kind of research focus coming at it, just starting. So I'm curious, and I am cautiously optimistic in terms of bringing that back in and sharing it with the team and how it'll impact for our kids. But happy to share that back with SEAC. Sorry, I probably should have included that we were part of that here. I apologize.
That's okay. That's good to hear. Go ahead, Donna.
So Andrea, just to clarify, are you one of the superintendents? I'm kind of assuming you are on that.
Yeah, I think they we moved from the so boards are clustered provincially. I know Donna's and Darlene would be very aware of that. Not all our members may be. So we shifted from the Barrie area over to Eastern Ontario. And when I looked at the list, I believe the reach out came to all of the Eastern Ontario and then extended beyond that. I would imagine Peggy Blair in Hamilton, who sits provincially on the Minister's Advisory, was on it, and quite often Andrew Canham in Thames Valley, and then my colleague Chris Samus up in Simcoe are often tapped for their expertise as well. So I believe it went out to the entire provincial group, but I did note all the Ottawa region names on the list.
Okay, that's good to know.
Can I just make an additional comment? I just find it interesting that there's maybe I should feel a little hopeful that there's these little pilot projects or things that are happening, initiatives that are happening that I feel that have been somewhat snippets of discussions at our SDC table. So and so it's interesting because that as I said, I feel a little hopeful that maybe that's what's happening, but who knows?
Go ahead, Andrea.
I apologize for adding, knowing that some members will have a hard stop at 8 too. One of the other items that came up in the last week is there's a committee called the DCYPN, the Durham Children and Youth Planning Network. There's both superintendents of special education and mental health well-being, Durham, obviously myself and Susie for Durham Catholic, and EDs of a lot of local organizations such as Marlene sits for Frontenac, Paul McGarry sits for Oshawa Lake, Oshawa Health, Durham Family Court Clinics there, Resources for Exceptional Children. And when we meet a couple times a year, there's invitation out to the ministries to come to kind of a ministry summit. And usually 1 or 2 of the 4 will come with representatives. Last week, I was quite optimistic when we were at that table. All 4 ministries sent representation, and all 4 had 2 or 3 people attend. And so when there's only about 10 or 12 of us on the committee and 4 ministries show up to ask how things are going for kids, children and youth and families, and what's going on. That was another spark of hope because it was Ministry of Health, MCSS, Ministry of Ed, and then Ministry of Justice, this last one. And what we asked for was collaboration and information early. So one of the things that's been signaled for us is summer learning programs, but we don't yet have the memo. Superintendent Neville's, Superintendent Negro and I are anticipating that it'll be academic and well-being, mental health, similar to last summer. Our after schools development program got extended to August, so we took that as a bit of a cue too that it's coming through. What we've asked for is multi-ministry collaboration and the memo by April. Last year we received the memo the 3rd week of June, and we need to move through our union partners and families. And that's just not soon enough for us to pivot. We also made a commitment from a mental health perspective to share those dollars with our community partners to put a really comprehensive map in place, but I need time to be able to do that. So our advocacy at that table was, we don't need it next week, but could we please have it by April so that we can take a really thoughtful 3-month run at summer services in a collaborative way, because the discussion between agencies and stakeholders is there. But we need time to be able to come together and work through our organizations. So Donna, if you're back at the SDC table, another plug, please. I need the memo sooner than later.
Greg, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll be very quick. Thank you for all that, Andrea. So I feel like I was kind of responsible for this letter getting put on the table. If you will recall, I was the one who mentioned about funding. And just for the record, I was actually hoping it would be included in the original letter we were sending. But of course, the general vibe was with SEAC that perhaps a separate letter would be more appropriate. That's why I didn't comment on it. I was kind of hoping it could have just been slid in as a sentence in the other one. So as such, I'm, for reasons such as that and also other ones brought up, I think the back burner on the letter is okay with me. I just thought I'd put that out there.
Okay, I'm just wondering now if they are doing some research into the provision of services and what our special education students need, then maybe we should see what happens with that and hope that we don't have a pivot back to virtual learning between now and June, because I think that's sort of the key. We just don't know. I no longer find anything surprising. So, okay, so we'll put that on, if we all agree to put that on the back burner for now and see where, where things go forward with respect to the ministry, then I think that's a good idea. if we want to move on now to 10C, our new business, which relates to the March break changes and the proposed, we now need to take a look at the change, the SEAC date, because that will be affected by our new, by the new break. So I think we are looking at possibly changing the date to Thursday, April 8th or Wednesday, April 7th. Does anybody have a preference of those dates, or go ahead, Claudine?
I prefer the Thursday over the Wednesday.
Rowan, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think because, you know, I don't know about other people, but set things up so that usually SEAC is on, you know, a given Thursday. People might have things on Wednesdays that might clash, but I definitely prefer the Thursday as well.
Okay.
Yeah,
Andrew,
I agree.
go ahead.
Yeah, just flagging the only reason why, because I agree with you with the structure of our weeks, the only reason why we were potentially, we gave Wednesday as another alternate is that is the Thursday leading into a 4-day weekend. And so didn't know if that changed other people's planning in that regard. So we just wanted to bring another option forward in case it was a conflict for any SEAC members with that in mind. It's fine for us as staff, but just for SEAC.
Okay, Donna, go ahead.
And my only comment is because when I was looking at it too, because if we leave the one in March, there's only 3 weeks in between. Because the one in March it was on the 25th, and then so it's only 3 weeks in between, and that was my only concern about putting it on the week before.
Yeah, actually 2 weeks, is it? Or yeah, it's quite short turnaround.
Yeah. And the break is, was there a reason we weren't having it the week of the 22nd? Or the
Correct. Yeah. Our entire senior team is pre-committed on that Thursday night at a provincial conference.
Right.
So I apologize. It's my conflict that doesn't have us moving in that direction. And because it is our entire senior team, there is not an ability to sub. Sorry.
No, that's...
The only other alternate, and I hesitate to put this in, but I think it does loop back to a comment earlier by Trustee Edwards. If we anticipate that the budget cycle might extend beyond June 30th and or an update on summer programming would be key for SEAC. Last year we did move our March meeting to the beginning of July in order to grab that that update and be able to participate because we are mandated to 10 a year as well. And last year we did end up in the quick transition. We dropped our March meeting and then regained it. So we could also send out a doodle poll to SEAC, Eva, if you wanted as well, to gather independent feedback in case anybody doesn't want to share through to YouTube this evening.
Okay, yeah, because we can, go ahead, Donna.
Yeah, because I was actually thinking of changing the March meeting to what would be March break the week before, and then we could do the 8th.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Right?
Yeah.
So that we would changing the two
that works.
2 meetings.
Yeah.
That works, and then it would space it.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, actually. Does everybody think should we move ahead with a motion to do that if everybody is agreeable to that, if that works for everyone? Okay. Does anybody?
May I just ask if Diane caught those dates, please, just to be fair to.
Yes, so it would be, March would be the 18th meeting, and then the 8th would be the April meeting.
Right.
Yep, I caught those. I'm good.
Thanks,
Okay.
Diane.
Does anybody want to put a motion forward then to change the 2 meeting dates?
Yeah, that works.
Yeah.
Rowan? Okay, seconded by? Darlene? All in favor? Okay, motion passed. Okay, moving on then to association reports. And I did receive an association report from Kathy Keaty from Voice and Deaf of Hard of Hearing, which was circulated, but I'll just read it out for people who may be watching live stream. Voice has been having a blast with their 2021 webinar series over the past few weeks. They were able to bring professionals, young adults, and children and families together to learn and connect virtually. It's not too late to join in the fun. If you visit their website, you can register there. All webinars are free of cost, thanks to the generosity from their friends at the Elks and Royal Purple Fund for Children. Upcoming on February 23rd at 8 p.m. is Advocating as a Family. And March 2nd at 8 p.m. is Meet and Greet number 2. Supporting family and children with hearing loss is at the heart of what Voice does, which is why they are excited to announce that they are offering a free 1-year membership to families who have children that have recently been diagnosed with hearing loss. To learn more about this opportunity, please visit the website. Make sure to like, comment, and share their posts on social media to spread the word to grow the Voice community. And there's a save the date for the annual Voice conference for 2021 on May 7th and 8th. With health and safety of our families and professionals top of mind, we'll be hosting the conference virtually. Get ready to hear first from some fascinating professionals you won't want to miss. Voice has teamed up with Sound Intuition and the Canadian Hard of Hearing Association to offer an afternoon of Dungeons and Dragons for teens and young adults on February 20th at 2 p.m. And there are only 5 spots available, so make sure to register. And I confirm that we did not receive any other association reports. I also, we have no correspondence this month, so we can move on from that. And then we're going to number 13, community concerns. Does anybody have, Donna, go ahead.
I think before we started the meeting, I started sharing some of the concerns that are happening in the community, not necessarily related to education per se, but it's a huge concern in that, you know, we recognize that people with disabilities have long experienced basically abuse, exclusion, marginalization, discrimination. And although we have made grounds and legislation and so forth, what there still is there's those perceptions or their attitudes or really ableism that happens. Even our education system was founded and supports the development of education for students with special needs was based on medical diagnosis or a medical model, and we're trying to move to a social model. But there's still those ingrained beliefs, and I even look at Teachers College and so forth around the medical model and focusing on the weaknesses and so forth. So I started on my own journey. I started doing some research, and so around history of disabilities, etc. And it's interesting because the film came up that was just released in January of this year. And it's called, and I didn't name the film, but it's called Crip Camp. Okay, and what it is that it's the journey of basically a disability movement in the U.S. And Crip Camp was actually a camp that was founded in about 1951, and it was located in the Catskills Mountains. And it was a camp that was run basically in the 70s by hippies, and it was very free-reigning group of camp, and kids with disabilities and people with disabilities went there and had basically free reign, coordinated but free reign of basically what they could do. And those individuals that worked at that camp became really activists, or if you wish, promoted disability rights and fought for the rights and additional legislation. And it's from their point of view. It has clips from the camps, and it's very, very moving because it's their journey that took over 10 years to actually get the legislation in place. It is rated R, just so you know, so please do not watch it with your young ones. But I was totally moved by it. As I was telling earlier, that I cried, I laughed, I cheered. I think I went through every emotion, and it's given very, very good ratings. I highly recommend people to watch it because it starts in 1971, and if we look at the civil rights movement, and it started before the rights for it, and it just, one of the sad things was, even when it came to media coverage on their sit-in, they had a sit-in that lasted over 20 days. Only one reporter reported on it. And the only reason why it ended up going national was because of, there happened to be a technician strike that was happening at some of the other local stations. So their material got distributed. And it's really something to see. So I really, I recommend you watch, because I'm finding that some of the changes, and we talked about the recent change to the application to Durham Region Transit, is that people with lived experience are not being consulted on how and doing these changes, and their voice is not being heard. And we're constantly struggling and fighting for this. And ableism, it's just a perception. And I thought it was a year ago, but it's not. It was before COVID, my last event that I attended with the Durham Down Syndrome Association. I talked to a young family who had, their child was, I think 5, if I remember correctly, 5 or 6 months old. And of course had Down syndrome. And their doctor still, when they're basically quoted all the difficulties, all the weaknesses and everything, and said, don't expect. And so our children still, to this day, have those. And but this is very inspirational. Highly recommended to watch it. Again, don't watch it with your young children.
Thank you, Donna. That's excellent. Does anybody else have any community concerns that they want to bring to the table this month? I do want to, if nobody else has anything to bring forward right now, I do want to bring to the attention or the question about the Whitby Transit Mall issue, and with respect to the school buses, and the understanding that the school buses will not be allowed to travel through that transit mall. And I think this obviously involves Metrolinx. It obviously involves agreements with Whitby and with the Ministry of Transportation, I would assume, at the provincial level. And, you know, from a SEAC perspective, I almost feel like that is a letter we want to write with respect to our students with, in particular, like who would normally have door-to-door pickup, like front door pickup at their homes, that if they lived in this area that was designated as a transit, part of the transit mall, that they would actually now have to travel outside to get their school bus. They won't be able to be picked up at their home or dropped off at their home like they should be. So when we talk about, you know, including people with disabilities and bringing them to, you know, the forefront of any planning, I think this is a serious lack of insight as far as sort of all those three levels of sort of government, really. And that maybe we should be writing a letter to, you know, Metrolinx, the ministry, and to the town, the Ministry of Transportation in the town, you know, expressing our concerns that this has not, that this is not, an exemption is not being given to the school buses, especially the school buses, the small school buses that do the home pickups. Go ahead, Donna.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that we passed to write a letter. So the board is passing, and it is going to focus on Whitby. But I can honestly also tell you, now this has already been approved, but in Ajax, they are moving the transit stops to basically the bus lanes. After they did all that construction, are moving from the outside to the inside. So similar to what you see in Markham, where their transit way is, so accessibility is an issue. Particularly in Markham, they've actually, some of the stops, the only access is through a walkway that's like a bridge. So there's only certain stops that are accessible. They will have with lighted crosswalks that has been approved, and it's Metrolinx does not listen. And talking to some other advocates that have had issues around Metrolinx, and the only way is going to be really a lot of people complaining, but also I would say to the ombudsman around Metrolinx. And their lack of consultation and thought around people with disabilities, because it's not going to affect, in my case, my concern is those students in high school that currently they take transportation, they may be able to take some bus, but then now you've got this whole group that are going to be at the center, even in Ajax. Like, so there's the two issues, and the lack of consultation. And again, the things like this that continue to happen for people with disabilities drives me nuts.
Yeah, well, and that's sort of my thoughts around it, is that, you know, I need opportunity to voice that, and you know, from our perspective as a SEAC, we have a bit of an opportunity to say, hey, you're not taking into consideration the needs of our students with disabilities, and hopefully other SEACs along the way pick up on the same thing, because it's not just it's kids with physical disabilities, it's kids with neurological, like, you know, sort of not neurotypical disabilities that are being affected by that. And I think that we really need to put our voice to it, I think. You know, I think it's an opportunity, whether they listen or not. I think it's important to do, and I think it's important to hit all of the levels that would be involved in that decision making. So I don't know, by a show of hands, I guess, does anybody want to move forward with a letter, sort of addressed to all three levels, with respect to our position on that? I guess if you're in favor, raise your hand. If you're not, yeah, Claudine. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And does anybody want to take a stab at a draft of that? Of what that looks like, or, you know, that I'm happy to go ahead and try drafting, with hopefully some input from you, Donna, who has probably a little bit more of the information behind it. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
Could you just clarify the term you used, Whitby Transit Mall? I'm assuming that's a geographic area, and how extensive that is. This is not a topic that I've heard about before today.
They're closing, sorry, Eva.
Go ahead, Donna.
They're closing a strip of Highway 2 through Whitby to basically the only, I don't know if you've ever been to Ottawa, but the only transit that can go through there are public buses. And so that they're closing that strip, and they're basically what Durham Student Transportation Services has been told is that it excludes school buses. So anybody within that drop off that normally got picked up the door in that area would be required to get a different access to at a different spot outside of the transit, but it also will divert some of the traffic, regular traffic, to the residential streets beyond that. And so there's going to be traffic issues there, and where also pickup, it may not be safe. So Durham, there is a report by Durham Student Transportation Services on it in the previous board meeting, a standing committee, I think, that we can forward, but it's a huge issue because it has the impact on routes. It will have an impact on possibly delays trying to get through there, extended times, etc.
Okay, thank you, Donna. Yeah, does that answer your question, Elizabeth? Yeah,
it does. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. I can go ahead and maybe do up a draft, Donna, and then send it over to you for some input on that.
If members wish, we can forward that section of the report that was provided to. It's public, but we can provide that section for background information.
That would be great. Thank you. Much appreciated. Okay. Do we have any other community concerns? We're running a little bit over time tonight, so just want to be respectful of everybody's time. But no. Oh. Okay, so we'll move on then to celebrations and successes. Do we have anybody have any? Sure, go ahead, Claudine. Yeah.
So it being February, I just have to take time to mention the Honorable Dr. Jean Augustine, who was our first Black woman appointed to Congress, who 25 years ago petitioned Parliament for Black History Month to be recognized. And in her keynotes that she's been giving this year, she wants us to remember that us Black people didn't live here in a bubble. Black history is our history.
Excellent. Thank you. That's fantastic. Yeah.
Well said, Claudine.
Yeah, very well said. And that is a success. Does anybody else have any celebrations or successes they would like to bring forward? Okay, and then our next SEAC meeting is scheduled now for March. I know I forget the date.
Here's the 18th.
March 18th, yeah, instead of March 25th. So March 18th, 2021, right here online. We just need a motion to adjourn. Oh, Donna, seconded. Elizabeth, all in favor?
Yep.
Well, meeting adjourned. Thank you.